So hello, everyone. My name is Jerome Braggs. I am the host of a new series called the Being Enough series, which is an interview series in which I will talk to spiritual teachers and thought leaders around the world on the topic of being enough. Like, how do we really feel into our enoughness, our wholeness, and our worthiness in our lives and ground ourselves in our divinity? And so I'm going to have some conversations with people personally that I personally follow, that I personally have gotten some wisdom from their teachings, from their musings, or from their work. And today's teacher is just no exception to that. I absolutely love this person. I was really excited about having this person in this interview. This has been probably 2 years in the workings to try to get this space going. But I just want to invite all of you all to be in this space and to open up to whatever wisdom comes. I'm a full believer that there is no coincidence, that if you're in this space, no matter how long you are going to be in this space, whether you're here live, whether you're here from, you're attending the replay of this space, that you're here because of a higher divine assignment, that your soul sent you to this spot in this moment, in this conversation, because something is going to be shared in this conversation will help you recenter yourself, or better express, or better accept and embrace your enoughness and your wholeness. So today's particular featured guest is Hollie Holden. And I was going to do some great big introduction of you, but I want to share just a story of you that will just help people understand and be ready for who Hollie Holden actually is. So this morning time where I am, and I had a conversation with Hollie before we were going to start this interview, just to kind of say hello. And as I got up this morning, there was a feeling that rose in me that was like, oh my God, I haven't shaved. I need to get myself together. I have to put my best face forward for this interview. And I was getting up and I realized I didn't have all the time to do that before we were going to connect. I really didn't have all that time. I was feeling rushed and I was feeling a little disappointed. And I caught myself in the midst of me doing that. And I said, wait a minute, aren't you literally about to have a conversation with the person that you think embodies wholeness and acceptance and being fully present and bringing all of yourself to the space and to the light and making that enough? Aren't you literally about to have a conversation with that person? So why would you not? Then it's totally okay to come into that space with that energy of accepting all of you are and knowing that it's enough and not having to try to better or improve yourself. And that is exactly who Hollie Holden is and her message that she shares in the world to me. I've been following her personally, her page now for 2 years, and I came across her because for all of you who may not know, Hollie Holden is also the wife of Dr. Robert Holden, who is the author of Lovability, Happiness Now, Success Intelligence. He's a beloved, best-selling Hay House author. He's been on Oprah, all of those things. And I've read his books, I've taken his programs. And one day, though, I was following his Facebook page and he posted something from Hollie who I had not known about. And I was just like, wait a minute. Whoa. I don't even remember what the post was about, but I remember it blew my mind. I said, whoever that is, she's got it. She understands. She gets it. I said, I need to research who that is. And I went to her Facebook page and I just was blown away. I literally spent 15 minutes just reading all your history stuff and just going through stuff. And I have to say, Hollie is probably the best voice in the world, in my perspective, on daily spiritual living, on embracing your wholeness and conscious parenting. I think that those three elements pretty much sum up her messaging really well. Of course, she goes all over the place with her messaging, much more than those three things. But if you are a person who is interested in really understanding how to daily spiritually live and to really embrace your wholeness, and also if you're a parent and you want to know how to conscious parent and you are in the right place, this woman's wisdom is out of the world, just out of the box with this. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Hollie Holden.
Hello, I'm here in this strange cyber world.
We're definitely having a cyber connection.
Yeah, it's so cool. But Jerome, thank you so much because it's so sweet to hear yourself like reflected in other people's words and feelings and thoughts. And you're just so gorgeous the way you describe me. And I'm really grateful. And I'm also really grateful to you for all the interaction on my page and the high fives you give me, as I go along my journey. It makes such a difference because, what we were saying before is that when you talk about anything like this, like being and enoughness and truth and love, it's like it's you've got to find the words, but you've also got to find the people to have the conversation with so that you're received, because it does go against the grain from the majority of people and the kind of mainstream thinking and belief systems. And so one of the really beautiful things that's come about for me through my blog is that I find myself not just speaking, but speaking into a receptiveness that I wasn't expecting to be there necessarily. And you're part of that. And I'm really grateful. And I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It is just an honor to just be in this space and have these conversations with you. And I'm just glad I can be part of that container. So thank you for that. I really want to jump in because there's so much juicy stuff that I want to get to. And you just brought up kind of my first, just something came up within me when you were speaking about that, because we don't really live in a current present society or culture that literally embraces and feeds enoughness and wholeness. There are so many messages out there that are about like, improve yourself, or you'll be okay when and if this happens, or if you lose the weight, then you'll really be beautiful, or if you have this amount of money in your account, then you're really enough, or when the outside of you is perfect and shining, then you can bring your whole self to the light. And it's really hard to say like enough of that. Like, I'm enough right here, and I deserve to own this space that I'm living in, and I deserve to bring all of this stuff, even if it's not perfect, even if I perceive it or I feel it is messy. I deserve to bring it to the light, and it deserves to stay there, right? So my question is, how did you get yourself to a space where you can say, I may not be the weight I want on the scale. I may not be, everything may not be perfect to me on the outside, but it doesn't make me less than in any way. Like, I can still show up for my life and bring Hollie to the space.
Oh, yeah, that's a very big question. It's a very good question. I would say, first of all, that it's an ever evolving process. So I think I see life and the spiritual path as a constantly evolving, moving game. So, I've reached a place of experiencing an enoughness in me, and then, thinking, oh, I've done it. I feel so enough. I feel so full. I feel so whole. And then the next layer hits, right? So you're like, oh no, here I am. Like, I've met this old school friend, and all I can think about is, oh my God, I must be looking this way and she must be thinking that. And it's like, where's that coming from? So I think when I answer your question, I have to be very truthful and say that, one of the things that I value the most in my life is friends and people who can be really truthful about where they are in that moment. And so before I kind of go into the answer, I also want to say that my truth wants me to say that, like, I don't always feel enough, because if I'm identifying with my ego, with my personality a lot, because I'm fearful, or I'm off kilter, or I haven't meditated for way too long, or I get taken out by something, or if there's learning in something for me, if I need to find my way back again and there's learning along that path, then I will get out of whack. I will get off center. So that's the first thing I'd say. The other thing, the answer to the question, really, I think there's so many layers to it. I think so many of the things that I've read have woken up a truth in me, like, when you read something and you have this deep sense of remembering, like a truer, deeper part of you. So I'd have to acknowledge that. I'd have to acknowledge the spiritual teachers who I have been lucky enough to work with. I would have to acknowledge in particular Course in Miracles for literally speaking to a part of me that knows the truth about this whole deal and that knows who I really am. That has played an enormous part in the kind of mysterious unfolding of me being here in the way that I'm here. I would also have to say, therapy, like good old fashioned getting your stuff out and doing your real inner work, because I think if you don't look at all your humanness and you don't look at all your wounds and you don't actually go into like how you really did feel as a child when this happened or whatever your formative experiences are, I think it's very hard to feel enough. I think it's very hard to get past the hologram of like all the uncomfortable, painful stuff. So yeah, that would be my answer really, is those things, and also just prayer and meditation as well. Like to come home to yourself in that way, I think is really the big one, because that's the container for all the other stuff to unfold in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's something I want to bring up, but I'm going to get to that in just a second, because I want to ask you first, like, we're speaking about enoughness and we're speaking about wholeness and all of that. Mm-hmm. What does being enough, what is just that terminology? What does that mean to you? Like, what do you take that to mean?
I am enough means that, such a good question, how to articulate it. I guess for me, it means that I accept myself deeply enough to really be here in all of my flawedness, because I know my wholeness. I know my wholeness well enough to be okay with the things I'm going to mess up every day, because I'm a human being. So, and what that means is that I don't take everything to mean that I'm not enough. You know what I mean? Like I try to look for the place in me that can respond from love, that can respond from the enoughness, that can respond from the wholeness, because that brings the enoughness to life. And it's almost like a way of being. And this is coming to me as we're speaking. I'm not like, this isn't like the be all and end all answer. I'm just feeling into it. It's like enoughness is a way of being. Do you know what I mean? It's like what you tune into. You can either tune into your enoughness, or, to be really honest, you can tune into the voices that you hear around you, and you can buy into that, and someone can like bump into you, or somebody can reject you somehow, or criticize you, and you can take that in to be true. It's always an option. For me, it's always an option. I'm like, oh yeah, I could go down that road. So I feel like enoughness is a choice. Like I choose to live from this place,
Yeah, and that's that just perfect segue into kind of what was coming up before, what I wanted to ask you. So what I see you doing so well, what you write about so well, because your writing is literally about your daily living and what your daily living has brought up for you. And what I always get from that is from your writing, even if you're not using those exact words, is here's the experience and here's the process of me choosing my enoughness in that experience, right?
Yeah.
And so what, like, one of the things I think you're a master at that I definitely wanted to talk to you about was, what does it, like, what do you do? Not like, what are the 7 steps to, but what does Hollie do daily? Like, because that's brilliance is like, it's so easy to feel our enoughness and to feel our connection to source and to remember our divinity and our lovability and lean into love when we're in the mountains, or at some ashram or at some meditation retreat, or when things are going absolutely great and everybody's telling us we're loved and we're being hugged and all those things. But and when we're separate from the responsibilities of daily life as a human being, it's easy to remember you're a spiritual being then. But what I think you do really well is take the human aspects and make those aspects, the human aspects of raising children and not putting on your best clothes all the time and, all these things, and having those aspects be the reminders as well that I'm still a spiritual being. And so I wanted to ask you, like, for all those people out there, because this is what I hear all the time when I've worked with clients or my friends, or just owning my own personal journey. It's totally easy when I'm at home and when I don't have any phone calls, or when I'm on some retreat and I've got my, I've got my incense and my candles going, I've got my crystals around me and all that, to feel like, yes, I'm loved, I'm whole, I'm enough, but what do you do when you get that call or you receive that comment on your Facebook page, or your relationship ends, or you really realize, you've gained 15 pounds, your clothes don't fit? What do you do then to say, I'm still enough, and not dive into the voices, as you mentioned, that say, you know what? You're not it, baby. You're not the thing you thought you were.
So, where to start on that one? I literally think that there are these, when you're flicking through your radio and you get the different radio stations and you and someone's talking about over here, and then you flick it back and there's like a really cool like 80s power ballad that gets you going, or whatever, and I literally think there's a space that begins to become more and more alive through spiritual practice and wanting to come home to yourself. There's a space that becomes alive in between what happens out there and how I respond. It's a space that exists, and in that space it's like you can choose. And what I find is that, first of all, the better I set my day up, the more likely it is that in that space I'm going to find a way through that brings me back to a loving response, loving towards myself, loving towards others, that brings me into alignment with who I really am. So whether that's like meditation, like sometimes I drop the children off at school, and before I drive off to go and get, the avocados or whatever, I stop and I sit there and I will say my morning prayer and do a chant and maybe read my course lesson on my phone, and just take a moment, like really slowing my life down just enough so that I have like, sometimes that can only take like 5-10 minutes. That's all I need to kind of open up that space and massage that space a little bit, so that when somebody bashes into the back of my legs in the supermarket, I have a little bit of space in me, that feels really important. And also having questions, I really believe that being spiritual in everyday life, as in bringing yourself to every area of your life. So the way you treat waiters, the way you speak to children, the way you are with people when nobody's watching, the real bits, like the real gritty bits, right? I guess I would say that it's a choice, but it's also about it's what you tune into, and it's it's having very, very practical tools, because this is my thing, right? Because it's all very well having these big grand visions of how you want to be and what you want to say, but it's very, very practical for me. So for me, it's like having my lessons on my phone, having the Course in Miracles app on my phone. Very simple. Having the CD in my CD player that I need, so I'm not scrabbling around finding it when I need to do it. Like, it's very practical, you know, like having my journal in my bag with at least 2 pens, so that if one of them gets stolen by the children, I've got one that I can scribble something down with. It's also like having my prayer that I say. It's having that written down and like kept in the same place in my bag, you know, because my bag gets really crazy in there. There's like bananas and I don't know what, but I have this one little bit where that's my prayer. And I feel like it's on that level, it's really practical. And it's also something else I feel is very important, is to have some questions, right? So to have some questions like, what would love do here? You know, what would love have me say in this situation? Because that opens up this whole other world inside me when I ask those questions. There are certain questions, you know, and it's but having the spaciousness to even ask the question, you know. But then once I ask the question, I'm like, yeah, that's much more aligned with, I can then feel the loving response to myself and others. So yeah, I think that would be my answer, is it's like, it's very practical, you know, it's having the tools like right there, whether that's for you. Some people need physical things like a journal or a prayer book, or even a book that like reminds you of the truth, like something you can hold in your hand. It feels like that, because, you know, I have to be very kind of on the go. You know, I've got 2 children and I'm running up and down the road doing the school run. But for example, even then I will play my chanting music. I'll play, what have I got on at the moment? There's Snatan Kaur. Do you know Snatan Kaur? She's my favorite. And I just have her album. And it's like there's a frequency that can open up while I'm driving, while I'm scrabbling around trying to find a snack for somebody because they're hungry. I create an environment for myself where I'm always reminded of who I really am, you know? So yeah, the answer is actually very practical for me. Very, very practical, like having the things I need to remind me of the truth, because it is so easy to get dragged away from that. Every moment there's an opportunity for that, you know?
Yeah, you know, speaking of the opportunities to get dragged away from that presence and that awareness, something that really drew me to you, that you're in your message, which I love, is how you have been able to bring your full presence and to find. I think you even mentioned it as like this. You even said that you find your presence in parenting, and that being a mother is almost your divine offering, which when I just read that, I just melted right there. And I want to say this because I've worked with so many parents, and oftentimes it is and not even if you're just a parent, just what you're doing in that space of making what life has presented to you your offering, right? It's just so beautiful. And it reminds me, and I want to talk to you about that in a second, but it reminds me of, I can't remember, but there was a French monk who initially went into the monasteries to become a monk. And at that time, you had to have a certain level of education. He was just a soldier, and he had gotten wounded. He couldn't be a soldier anymore. And so he went into the monastery. And so he wanted to be a monk. And they said, you can't be a monk because you don't have this level of education, but you can be in the kitchen. Like, you can be a cook at the monastery. And he just like literally full on embraced this process of where he was. He said, okay, I fully believe that wherever I am, I can find the divine. And wherever I am, the divine is. And so I'm going, and this is what's being offered to me to experience the divine. I'm being offered by the divine an experience of being a cook to experience that. And he leaned so far into that experience and became so present in that experience that literally people from all over the world would fly in just to watch him bake bread. And they would have this conversation about just the way he is being present with breaking bread. I see God and I experience God just from this. And he became a monk just from, I think it was called Brother, I can't remember what it was, I can't remember his name real well, but he became a brother just because of the way that he was fully present in what was being offered to him. And he made his life an offering, like baking bread was an offering to the divine. And I brought that story up because I fully see that in you, like all the things that people usually take as stretching them away from the divine, like changing diapers, or their child is screaming, or they had a plan to do this and their children brought up something totally different. And so that what I usually hear people say is, how can I carve a space in my life to experience the divine when all of that is happening? And what I hear you saying is, that is my space to experience the divine. Right there, when my child is screaming, when I want it to look great, but my children, I have putty in my hair today because my children have done this, or whatever. Like, that's my space right there to experience my wholeness and to experience the presence of the divine. I just want to just leave, give you the mic, and how did you do that? Because you do that really well. And how did you get to a space where you said, being a parent, being a mom is my offering?
It's so funny doing interviews because it's such a good question, and I'm listening and I'm going, I'd love to hear what someone would say to that. Yeah. I'd love to know the answer to that. Yeah, because it's such a good question. And the honest answer is I'm not completely sure, and I really mean that. I mean, I think we bring things, right? I think we bring things to our experience that are unknown. And I have to say, ever since I was little, I've felt this mysterious part of me that knows things, right? And I can't really describe that with words. But every time I would read, we have quite a lot of these sort of, spiritual books around our house or whatever. And I remember reading this one and I flipped it open. And it was like, I would do this and the quote would speak to this really old part of me, right? That just knew everything you've said, that just knew this. I didn't have to do anything to get there. I just knew it. And one of them was that, the old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm not that I'm enlightened by any means, but that every time I would have my wisdom affirmed, or if someone would come to me, like if another mother was struggling, I could find it in that, right? So if she would say to me, oh, I've just spent the whole week, with my kids have been sick and I've barely done anything on my to-do list, and everyone else looks like they're kind of going out and doing all this amazing stuff. And I'm like, you're doing the most important job in the world. And I could feel the truth when I responded to her. Does that make sense? Right. So it's like I would find that truth in my relating to others and my realizations. And I started, Jerome, from a point of really having to learn this, because when Robert would travel, I remember I got this text one time. He's like, hi, Holes, how are you? I'm in wherever, Texas, having a cup of tea with, really cool people like Caroline Mace and Marianne and all those people who I love their work and I would love to ask them more questions. I'd love to hang out with them as people. And he said, what are you up to? And I was like, scrubbing the guinea pig cage, and which was truthful. That was what I was doing. And there were these two voices in me. Like one voice was like, oh my God, he's going to talk to 2,000 people today about really wise things. And they're all going to be crying and laughing and smiling and feeling grateful for him. And then he's going to go and have tea with these amazing teachers who I'm really interested in. And what have I achieved today? I've scrubbed the guinea pigs out and I've kept everyone alive and everyone kind of had a few vegetables at dinner, which was really cool, a bit of a miracle. But, I had to really take that into like the space where I can find my truth, because the feeling for me was, oh my God, I'm behind. I'm out of the loop. I'm not doing what I'm meant to be doing. But I just gradually, really through, I guess, my conversations with people and my tuning in and my guidance and my prayer and people who've encouraged me along the way to kind of remember this truth. And Rumi, like reading Rumi will get you right home wherever you are. And Eckhart Tolle, I mean, he writes beautifully about presence. He writes something amazing like, I shouldn't do this because I never remember the quotes when I say this out loud. They kind of live in me, But that thing of don't ever let anybody tell you that there's anything more successful than a fully present moment or something like that, And those kinds of things would just like hit this place in me as a mother, and it would go, yes. And I would sit up straighter and I would remember myself more fully. And I would remember that, this sense of having been this kind of enlightened monk who could chop vegetables all day and feel entirely fulfilled, because in the chopping of the vegetables, is the relating to the God self. Nothing else matters, nothing else. But that is the other part of it. As I say that out loud, it leads me to the remembrance of like, the more I put my connection with love and God and whatever you want to call that, I alternate between God and love. They're the same for me. If I put my connection with love and listening to love, if I put that first, it really doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like, it really doesn't matter. But it does mean I can bring myself more fully to what I'm doing. Because if I live from the being space, then the doing takes care of itself. And so it's like flipping it to that way round, rather than saying like what I do defines who I am. It's like, well, what if who I am and what I bring defines whether or not what I'm doing is divinely connected, and I mean, honestly, I think the prayer that has worked on me the most deeply and changed me the most profoundly, and that sets me up every day, is the Course in Miracles prayer. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Because the answer to that prayer gets lived out in your day. And the truth is, you can speak to 3,000 people in a packed out auditorium, or you can speak to the DHL guy who comes to the door with your packages. If you're being guided and you're asking, how can I be the presence of love today? It doesn't actually matter who you're speaking to, what you're doing. What matters is what is in that connection, and that's what I found as a parent. If I do that and I set it up like that, then the most important thing I could be doing right now is speaking to my children. And we're really into playing that game at the moment. Guess who? Did you ever play that game? It's like you have these little doors and you have to say, does he have like they say boiled head instead of bald head. Does he have a boiled head? And I was playing it for like an hour yesterday because they're really into it. And there was this part of me that was like, oh my God, some people are like saving refugees out of boats. And some people are, solving criminal law cases and like changing law to protect people. And I'm playing guess who? I'm asking, is it Herman with the glasses? But I was also giving my children an experience of presence, and I was in my joy, because I played it a lot when I was little, and I actually really found a way to enjoy myself while playing with them. And that's what counts. And if for me a successful day is when I can track a few really present moments, like really present. And that may mean that when you get present, you have to feel a lot of big things. It's not necessarily presence equals joy, but I was present. I was here. I was in my life, not about the outer achievements. And sometimes I do achieve stuff outside. That happens, but that's meaningless too, right? On a worldly level, I achieved something, but that's meaningless too if it doesn't have this ingredient in it, if it doesn't have this deepening of my connection with my God self, with my true self, with love. It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, that's but the how is kind of a mystery. You know, it's like a guided mystery that is unfolding in me.
Yeah, I think what the beautiful thing you got was that I got from that was the how comes when you're centered in your why, which is what you just were. Like,
exactly,
you were centered into like as long as I come with the why, like the why is I want to be the presence of love today, and I want to be present for what love is showing and presenting me today. If I can just do that, then the how comes. You so beautifully said that, and it reminded me of something. I wanted to say this to you because you something you said and what you were talking about, where you was talked about. I kind of want to give this to you. You said you weren't. Well, actually, let me say this first. I reach a lot of, especially people who come to me for readings. A lot of people come and they want to know, like, one of the biggest things is, what's my purpose? I feel like I'm not in my purpose. I feel like I'm not doing what I came here to do. And you know, and I always, and the answer is almost always like, can you be just more present and be more of yourself? And you will be serving your purpose, right? That's it. And that is not always about, because from the God self, the higher aspect of you, does not really care if it's for 2,000 people or if it's for the person in here, because it's the same impact. I think that's what we don't usually get. We don't usually hear that anytime you're present and you're being loved and you're showing up, you were having a tremendous impact for that person that ripples out the same way as if you were on stage talking to 2,000 people. Like, it is the same impact. It's just difference in numbers. And if you do that, that's just, you beautifully talked about that. And so I wanted to say, like, I literally see you as an enlightened being, because just the definition of what I call enlightened is literally in the light. And so as you're embracing wholeness, as you're literally taking the path of being more and more present every day, you literally are being the light, because that's what the light is, love and wholeness. That's what the light literally is. So am I being in the space daily? And I think enlightenment is a daily practice. It's not, I've got it and I'm here. It's, am I making the choice to be in love and to be in wholeness today? Which is the greatest gift you're giving imagine the impact you're having for your children, that they have a mother who is in making choices, and to differing degrees, right? But making the choice at differing degrees daily to be present, to be love, and to be wholeness, and what that teaches them, which is what I kind of want to move into in the second question, like, amazing conscious parenting. You know, you're again an example of what a lot of people call conscious parenting. I remember I saw a post of you a while back, and I think it was your daughter Bo, and someone had come up to her and they were talking to her, and it was kind of the conversation that so many parents and so many children, all children across the world, have had this experience. All parents are very familiar with this experience. I think someone was asking her something, and it was requiring her they were wanting her to be in a different emotional space than she was. Either it was like to say hello or to say thank you or something. And you kind of came in and you were like, no, like, if she doesn't feel that way, she doesn't have to feel that way. Like, she doesn't have to say thank you if she doesn't mean it. She doesn't have to, like, kiss you on the cheek if she doesn't want to. Like, I want my daughter to own where she is, like, her authentic space. And to not feel like she has to be something different than what she is. And I was just like, when I read that, I was like, yes, she got it. She gets it. Yes, yes, right? I was just like, yes. And I just think that is a beautiful, but I don't think in conscious, which a lot of people will come to me and talk to me about, like, how do I be a more conscious parent? I do not think you get to be in that space if you don't make the commitment first to be a more conscious person, like to have a more conscious life, right? So I don't think you can talk to Bo about owning her wholeness in her space if you weren't practicing owning your own
Exactly.
wholeness and owning your own space?
Well, because Jerome, if you don't do your inner work, forget about the outer work. Like, forget about it, because, you know, it's like you can read all the wisest books on parenting, and you can read all the kind of instructions on how to raise like a self-assured, happy, whole child and all that stuff. But if you're not doing it for yourself, honestly, after a few years and you're tired and there's a lot going on and whatever, if you're not doing it for yourself, you don't have the first hope. And some days I don't have the first hope. I have to go back to scratch. I'm like, okay, I'm not holding the space right now. You have to be really honest with yourself. You have to be honest. You have to be real. These beings who are coming in are unapologetic for their truth. So my daughter will tell me when I'm doing things. She says, Mummy, I will put my socks on, but I need you to know that the voice you asked me to put my socks on in was not kind, and I need you to ask me again in a kind way. You know, yeah, that's, if I reflect back on that moment, that's absolutely true. And can I come back to myself? Can I get present again? Can I apologize with innocence and truthfulness? Yeah, I can find that place, and I do. And I believe that being a conscious parent is not about being a perfect parent. It's not about doing what the books say. It's not about, oh, well, you have to respond to this and you have to do that. It's like you do your inner work so that you can remain flexible and open enough to the voice of love to be in the moment and to respond in the moment, because there is no right or wrong answer. My children are entirely different. One of them is, you know, a little bit anxious, very artistic, sensitive, maybe a little bit more like me. The other is like this kind of, you know, he wakes up and he's like, where's my sword? You know, he's so funny. He's just this like really funny physical being, very sensitive as well, but in a whole different way. If I try to apply the same thing to both of them, like it's pointless. So, you know, all I can do is my inner work and to stay as present and responsive as I can, and to forgive myself when that goes wrong, because then I'm teaching them how to forgive themselves. You know, that's the layer of how you treat yourself is the layer that I think gets ignored when we talk about parenting. It's all about how to kind of, you know, have your child have this sort of perfect experience where they have no wounds and they grow up and they don't need any therapy. It's like, I'm sorry, but most people are going to need therapy, and I'm really grateful that I was forced into therapy by my upbringing. I'm really grateful that I was pushed onto my search. I don't want to deprive my children of some of the grit they need to do their thing. They're going to have mother issues. They're going to have stuff around me. It's nature. It's life. It's like I can't give them the perfect experience that I thought I could when they were born. But I can be accountable. I can do my inner work. Like, for example, I've got a really good example just from this week where, so my daughter is turning 9. And when you sort of study the soul development of the child from this perspective of Rudolf Steiner, which I'm very passionate about, the turning 9 is a really big moment in childhood, because you're releasing your childhood self. You know, you're releasing your baby self. You're releasing what you've relied on all this time, which is your mum and dad being very much like your protectors, and you're kind of beginning to take your first steps right into it makes sense when you think about it, but most people don't know this key sort of critical point in development. So she's feeling a lot of feelings, and she needs a lot of reassurance, and she needs to tell me what this is like for her. We sat in my office the other day, and I found this place in me where I'd stopped being able to be generous. I couldn't do it. And I was like, wow, what is this? My wisdom tells me she needs spaciousness, she needs kindness, she needs listening. My body was giving me this other experience of like antsiness, like, okay, come on, get through this feeling already. You know, like, I'm being truthful now. It's like, there's a gap between those things often. You've also got the other child calling from the other room, you know, to find his sword or whatever it is, you know, and you've got all this stuff going on. But what I realized is that what I needed to do was to go back to myself and to listen to myself. Because if I give myself even 5-10 minutes in the morning each day to say, hey, you know, what's going on? Like, what wants to be felt? What wants to be said? What's uncomfortable here? What would be more joyful? Like, what would be this? What do we need to lean into? If I ask myself these questions and tune into myself and give myself the space that I need, whether that's going on a walk or having a therapy session or having a really good conversation with a friend that brings me home to myself, whatever it is, if I do that, then I can be spacious for my daughter. Then we can sit and look out of the window of my room and see a tree and say, hey, that tree's like let go of its leaves with such trust, but the new leaves haven't come yet. And it's awkward being kind of naked. And for her to find herself in that and go, yeah, I really understand that tree. You know what I mean? Like it just came to us that there was this perfect example right outside our window. But the spaciousness for that conversation could only come about because I am learning to tend to myself as a person. And if I have the ability to do that for me, then I can do that for my children. It's inner work. It's inside out work, parenting, the whole way. You can't will yourself to be the parent you want to be. You have to go inside. You have to learn to forgive. You have to learn to pray. You know, you really do. In my opinion, like in my experience, yeah.
Yeah, really juicy. I wanna save these last questions that are coming up for me last. But I wanted one more kind of question that I want to ask, because this is something that I know many people who are going to watch this will resonate with at some point or another, whoever you are. And I think this is a really big, your experience as a healer for many around this, even if they can't name this. And so I want to name it, and I want to give you a chance to speak to it. So, you know, as we talked about in the beginning, and you've talked about here, like you are married to Dr. Robert Holden, you have children, you have a relationship together. Mm-hmm. But what often I see in people in relationships is when someone is in a relationship with someone who is a bigger personality and celebrity status. You're literally in a relationship with someone who's a celebrity status. They're like Hay House darling. They've been on Oprah. They have best-selling books. Their voice is out there. Like, millions of people know them, and they come to them and they speak with them. And it can be very easy for people who are in relationships with somebody who is the bigger personality to not also find, own, and express their authentic voice. Mm-hmm. And I just think you do that. So that was another thing why I was drawn to you, because I was following Robert for a long time. And I saw, when I was very impressed, it just spoke to the soul of my heart. When I saw your work and I said, wow, she has her own voice. Like, this is not a regurgitation necessarily of what Robert is saying, although you talk about some kind of similar things, but the way you talk about it is uniquely you. And you're not usurped necessarily by, you know, his beingness. You have your own beingness, and it occupies the space. And I don't see you trying to make your beingness his beingness, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would love just that conversation of, how did you find and own your space in a relationship with someone who has a big space, and the space that they own is really big? How did you say, I mean, you spoke to it before, like when he was, you know, having, you know, tea with Marianne Williams and Carolyn Miss, you were like, wow, I want to do that. But also, that's great. You do that. Awesome. And here's my space, though. And I'm going to step in that space. Like, what? I don't even know how to formulate the question around that. I'm just going to say, speak to that.
Yeah, just open it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I remember the first time, I think I was actually in California, and I began to feel like I wanted to start writing. I've always wanted to write. Like, my sister teases me because my first poems were so hilarious, because I wouldn't just describe a leaf. I would describe like sort of 6 different versions of red. You know, I would use like russet and scarlet and, you know, all that stuff. And she still takes the mickey out of me for that. But I've always loved words and writing. And I remember the feeling of like, I think I just want to start writing like a blog. And I told my sister and a close friend of ours, Duncan, and I told Robert, and they were not allowed to tell anyone else. I was like, I will send you the link and I'll tell you when I've put something up, but you're not allowed to tell anyone, because I just needed to have my own space to kind of experiment with. Even like the first time you write stuff down, it's really scary because it feels like it comes into existence and it has its own life. And it's a weird feeling. It's like something's being born and you're like, oh my, wait a minute, this is weird, you know? So he wasn't allowed to tell anyone. No one was allowed to tell anyone. So I just took my own time and space to begin to allow myself the first kind of buds of something to exist in me. And then I began to slowly share. And then I remember the first time he said, look, I'd really like to mention on my radio show that you have this blog because I think it's really brilliant. And he asked me a few times and I said no. And then finally I said, okay, do it. And then I literally like hid under a duvet. I was like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I say that? But, you know, what I would have to say as well is that I think part of the answer has to be about Robert, because Robert doesn't set himself up to be anything other than a response to the same prayer that I say, like, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? You know, that prayer is the foundation for his life and it's the foundation for mine. And that means that our purposes are intertwined in lots of ways. Like, you know, lovability, we birthed that together, like entirely. You know, we sat for hours every night going through that. He would bring what he'd written, then we'd change it and and we totally marry up on all the levels, but we have entirely different ways of expressing that truth. And in a way, it's quite helpful that they're not even comparable. You know, what I want to talk about is not what he wants to talk about, and vice versa. And yet the foundation is the same. The foundation is like, we're teachers of love, and that's all that matters to us. But the way we express that is entirely different. And so for me to even consider trying to like be like him or anyone feels weird for me. I can't explain that really. Apart from that, just feels like I just can't. I can't do that. Like it's not an option in my being. There isn't an option for me to try and emulate something or someone, or I just have to speak from where I am in the moment. And that's all I know to do. Like genuinely is all I know to do. And I don't even know how to do that particularly well. Like I'm learning to write, but you know, this is a stretch for me now to try and articulate out loud. It's like my first blogs, you know, my first interviews have been like this. They've been like, where are the words going to come from and how am I going to say this? And I begin to ease into it as I go along. But then I find that I can speak about that, right? I can speak about that sometimes it's really hard to think, oh my God, there might be someone watching thinking that I've got a bogey on my nose or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where my thoughts go. My first ever interview, this friend of mine invited me onto his Hay House radio show. And I was like, oh my God, I actually really enjoyed it. We did a parenting call-in and it was so fun. But he called me and it was all set up and it was live on the radio. And I got so nervous that I don't know what came over me, but I pressed a button on the phone and just cut myself off. So the first thing that happened was he said, hi, this is Hollie Holden, da, da, da. And I literally put the phone down. And then I was like sitting there flapping my arms going, what am I supposed to do? How do I call back? I don't know what to do. And they called me and it was fine. And, you know, we put it down to a technical hitch, which was basically me. I was the technical hitch. But, you know, it's like, it's just an unfolding that's happening. And I just have to kind of be with it and go with each urge as it comes. Do you know what I mean? And I just think Robert and we want to live in a way where we have a side-by-side love. You know, we have like a side-by-side looking out into the world, serving kind of a love. And that's, you know, I think again, that comes from studying the course and realizing the kind of futile nature of that sort of like chasing the special love. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like that it leads to pain because it's not really love. It's need, and it's a lot in there, but it's not love. It's not the love that interests us. And so of course we have our couple stuff go on and we, you know, argue about like which spoons to throw away and which spoons to keep, or whatever the conversation is, you know. We're perfectly human, you know, and I'm actually quite rubbish at times in relationship. Like, it's an area where, oh my God, I really can be a bit pants, you know. But we get through because we have this basis of like just trying to be a loving presence to each other, and then to use that to go out and love the world, because that feels like it's our purpose together, just like it feels like our purpose to bring children into the world too, in that way. So yeah, I would have to also credit his generosity and his spaciousness and his always wanting me to find my voice and to fully back me up in that, and to say, yeah, say it. If you feel like saying that, say it, go for it, you know. And I'm the same with him. I think we're very generous with each other in that way.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, there's one more, I just, in the interest of time, because I could go so far into that, but just in the interest of time,
Yeah.
there's another kind of big question I want to ask you, which big answer question, really,
Okay.
because what you're talking about just kind of brought this up for me. So I have two clients that I'm working with, personally, coaching wise, and both of them are, one of the things that's coming up for them is like authenticity, and just really bringing the fullness of themselves into the light, whether that fullness is a part of their sexuality, whether the fullness is a part of their quirkiness or their weirdness, whether the fullness is whatever it is, like really embracing that, and not just bringing that, you know, the two clients I work with now, they also are both have businesses. One is a healer, the other one is that. And I kind of came to them with this conversation around your greatest gift to the world is yourself, and the greatest gift that you can give to people that come to you, whatever they're coming to you for, like whether you're cleaning their carpets or you're helping them heal their bodies or their lives, like the greatest thing you can do is to bring yourself and all of what that is, no matter if you think that's too ugly to be in the light, or you think it's too weird or too whatever. And that's something, again, that I think you speak well to, is owning the all the aspects, even if it's weird or if it's flawed in some way or whatever, like doing that, and also knowing that that's your superpower, like that very thing is a superpower for you. So just in the interest of those two people who are watching, or I know they'll watch the replay for sure, what would you say, or what have you learned specifically? I'll just use it like that. Like, what have you learned about bringing all the aspects to the light? And then, which will lead me into the shorter, juicy questions after that.
What have I learned? I've learned to trust the unconditional foundation of love that can hold anything. And the way to make that real for me, I think a metaphor that I've used a lot, and it's really helped me, has been to see the sky and the weather. You know, so the sky is like my wholeness. The sky for me is a reflection of my wholeness. It's like this kind of ever-present, like the sun's always shining, whether it's covered up or not. You know, that's the love. And then you get like the clouds that come across, or the rain that comes down. Sometimes you get a rainbow, sometimes you get like a tornado. And the sky never questions that. And the sky never gets freaked out by that. The sky never tells the rain to be less rainy. It doesn't worry that the clouds have set in for like 3 whole weeks. You know, it doesn't. Does that make sense? It's like that's to me a really helpful reflection of the presence that I have come into contact with through my practice and through living. Is there's this presence that holds us no matter what. And it's only when we begin to kind of lean into the safety of that, I think, that we can start to bring more of ourselves to the table. And it's not the easy path, because it means you have to feel your feelings. It means you have to be truthful. it sometimes means you have to decide not to be in contact with another person, or it might mean that you need to make some really big changes to go down that path. It's not like the rosy path, but it's the one that brings the learning, and it's the one that takes you into a deeper relationship with yourself. And it's interesting that you bring this up, because I was at the gym yesterday, and I was talking to my the guy who's been giving me some training sessions, very sweet guy, and he began to tell me that he wants to set up a business, a personal training business, with one of the other trainers in the gym. And they began to talk about it, and he told me the name, and he told me what their plan was, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Can I be honest?" And because I know him well enough now to do that. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, I'm finding the name and the concept really boring." you know. And he was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, I'm not saying that in an unkind way. I'm actually saying it in a loving way. I said, "I think you're trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. And I think you're trying to fit your business into the way that everyone else runs their businesses. And I think you're seeing an industry that runs a certain way, and you're trying to find how you can fit into that." And he said, "Oh, well, what's the alternative?" He had no concept of an alternative. And I said, "Well, when I look at you, this is what I see." And I told him that I see his sense of humor, and I see his exuberance, I see his acceptance. The first time I ever had a session with him, I was able to completely lay the cards on the table and tell him that I'm terrified of gyms, and I'm convinced that I'm going to have one of those cartoon moments on a treadmill and fall off onto my face, and that I feel really, really like overweight and blobby in my yoga pants, and that if he leaves me alone, I will stop doing whatever he's telling me to do because I'm like inherently lazy. And, I just told him everything, and he was able to hold me in that. He didn't get freaked out. He went, "Okay, I can do that." And I said, "This is what I see in you." And I said, "If you're going to start a business, what I would coach you to do is to bring yourself to people and to show who you are." And I said, "If you're going to record one of those like exercise videos, keep the bit in where you kind of fall over or say the wrong thing." Because I said, people are tired of being sold another version of themselves that is better and down the road. People don't want that. People want a relationship with who you are. And that includes like you talking about what you find hard, and your own journey and your own story, and you bringing yourself fully to the table. And he was like, "Oh my God." And I said, "Then how does that feel?" And he said, "That feels amazing." He said, "I can do this now." He said, "I've been talking about this with my friend for 2 years, and I finally feel like I can do this." So I'm going to text him, and the next time I have a training session, I'm going to sit with them, and I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to be like, "You guys are funny and silly and funky, and you need to think of a really fun name for yourselves, and forget the industry, like forget the conditioning, forget what you think you've got to do. Be yourselves, because that's what people respond to. That's what people around you want." And so to come back to your question, it's like, we think in a relationship or in a company, we think we have to be what everyone else wants. And it's like, but what if that's not true? What if us being more ourselves gives them permission to be more themselves? Who are we to take that away from them, that possible opportunity that they might come alive to themselves in this whole other way? And when I share in my writing, like, "Oh my God, I fell over today," or, "Oh, this totally crazy thing happened to me, and I can't believe I said that," and the silly things that happened to me, did you read the one in Costco when the guy said, I signed up for a Costco membership card, and he had this little camera like on the desk, and I was meant to stand like 2 meters like this, and for some reason I put my face right up and I went like this in the camera. And he was like, "Excuse me, I'll need you to stand approximately 2 meters away and like not smile so much," kind of thing. And I was like, "Oh yeah, of course, yeah," and I sort of pretended to be cool and walked off. But it was just so embarrassing, and I was on my own, and I was just like, So I wrote about it, and the fact is that in writing about those moments, it's like it gives other people permission to kind of like embrace their goofiness, rather than how I used to be. I remember I fell over in a station once, Jerome. I swear, I fell over in a station and I was so embarrassed that I thought if I just laid still, it wouldn't have happened. But of course, because I laid still, people thought I was really hurt, right? And I had my suitcase was like my suitcase had kind of dragged me along the floor. So I was just in this totally undignified situation. But I thought, well, if I lie here, it might not have happened. But then, of course, I had like 20 people like seeing if I was okay, and it was just awful. And I just went home and I was like cringing like crazy for about 3 weeks. But, you know, I've learned that if I bring that to my relationships, if I bring that to my writing, if I bring that to the world, if I bring the parts of myself that feel goofy and silly or moody and rude, or if I bring all of it, it's like people can feel who I am, and that's what people want, and it gives them permission to be more of themselves. So that would be my response to what you opened. Yeah.
I just one of the things I'm sitting with personally right now is the understanding, like giving myself permission to understand that every part of me serves, that all of it serves, that all of it is of service. It's of service first to me, so that whatever flaw or imperfection or embarrassing moment or whatever is in service to me, so I can welcome it, so that I don't have to be in a space of resistance to it and be in a space of making it wrong, right? And when I know that everything serves, then I can begin to understand that if it serves, then everything needs to be in the light, right? And I've had so many experiences where I thought the very thing that doesn't need to be in the light, when I finally brought it to the light, it was like, oh, that's the very thing where like my greatest joy begins centered around, or my freedom begins centered around, or my success begins centered around. So it's that thing where I can look at myself and I can say, so I may not, like, one of the biggest things that I had for myself with that was very just, transparency moment. I had resisted the title of healer for a very long time. And I've been hearing it in my meditations. I've been getting kind of feedback from people to say, like, that's really what you are. You need to have that. You need to center your work around that. And part of that was part of my resistance that I was telling myself, like the smaller self, the messaging was, well, nobody actually really heals anybody else. You help them heal themselves, right? And so I was telling myself that was my big resistance to it. That's why I didn't want it. It was because because I didn't want to be in a space where I was disempowering people and making them believe that something that I was doing I was the source of something and they were not. Yeah. But when I really peeled back the real authenticity of it, like the real truth of it, was I was resistant to accepting healer because I felt like, how could I like really heal? Even though my work, I've helped many people heal from emotional, life, body, disease, illness, all that stuff. But I was still experiencing some health challenges. So how could I be this healer and own this nomener of master healer when I have not healed? And I was hiding that aspect of not healing, right? Because I thought that didn't deserve to be in the light, because how are they going to come to me and how are they going to work with me? But just like you said, it's like when I owned all of that and I began to bring the authentic piece to me, to that, not only did my work deepen and people show up and say, well, what I find is when you become more authentic, people lean in closer to you. So, people were leaning in closer to me, not just in my relationships and my work, more people were showing up. But I had a deepening more understanding that freed me about what healing really is anyway. Healing is touching all the places in you that you've been, previously touching with fear, you touch them with love. And it's the returning of your perspective and your experience of yourself back to wholeness. And I know how to do that. Like, those are things that I really know how to do, right? That was my journey. But it was that whole piece which you just spoke to, which was, can I take with big arms out like this, can I grab into the whole bag of myself and pull all of that up, and not just the really shiny bits at the top of the basket, but like all of the basket, pull it up and like hold it to my heart and like walk down the street with it in the light. And when I can do that, when I can make the choice to, and it's a choice that you've spoken about so beautifully today, it's a constant choice. When I make that choice, that daily choice, that's when I'm of the greatest service to other people, because I think what you just reminded me of for my own taking away today is that the only thing love is ever asking of us is us. That's it. It's not asking anything else. The only ask it ever has is for us to be us. And then that's enough to serve, that's enough to heal, that's enough to succeed, that's enough to be happy. Us is enough. And so I thank you so much for that message. So I have some fun questions before we end this interview today.
Okay.
They're fun. I'll say shorter. They're shorter answers rather than big answers.
Okay.
So we talked about like being enough. And oftentimes, you know, as you know, spiritual teachers, we get in our wisdom and we get in this wisdom place and all that. But I want to kind of get to the grit. Like, so what happens for you when you don't feel enough? Like for me, not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what's your, like my groove is, if I get, like my groove is always around weight and self-image. So that's when I get the feeling like, oh, I've gained a pound, and all of a sudden the voice says, oh, you're horribly unattractive now, right?
Yeah.
So that's my groove. Like, what's the groove for you?
Oh God, I do that one. Yeah, I do that one really well. I'm quite spectacular at that, actually. What else do I do? I compare myself. Like I saw this somebody who does something similar to me, you know, the writing, teaching thing. I saw her in a picture on Facebook wearing this particular dress, and she looked so ridiculously resplendent and kind of like everything. And it wasn't just physical, it was just like this beaming sort of something. And I just, for weeks, I was like, well, what's the point? What's the point? There's no point. A, I'm never going to look like that in a dress. And B, like, that is so shiny that there's no point me even trying, you know, because it was shiny in a way that was meaningful to me. I then went to see Brene Brown. That was an interesting experience, because part of me was like, oh my God, this woman is speaking the truth. Like, this woman's wisdom speaks to me in this whole other way. And this other part of me was like, yes, so you might as well go back to bed, you know, because other people, I would see them speaking and I would go, oh, that's so cool. I love that. I love that he's talking about that. That's fantastic. Oh my God, brilliant. But when you see someone who gets a little bit like close to your territory, it's like game over. And that's when I know I need to give myself a talking to and go back to the love voice of like, what are you doing here? Forget about that. Like, it's very firm. It's a loving, but it's very firm. When I go back to that energy, it's like, you're not using Brene Brown. That's not fair on her, and it's not truthful for you. Don't do it. You know, but it's where I go if I'm truthful, when I'm truthful, which I can't help but not be. Yeah. Whatever, however you say that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, in Being Enough, which is the title of this series, what's your favorite tool? Like, what's your go-to tool when you're out of the space of feeling enough and being enough? What's your go-to tool to kind of get you set up? For me, it's a bath, hot water bath. When I am not feeling it, like let me get in the bathtub and I can get back in that center. What's your go-to tool?
Oh, I do love a good bath. Do you know what I love? Actually, what comes to me is I love my card decks. I have these amazing card decks. Like, I have angel cards, and I have like an amazing new one called Vision Quest. These are like shamanic healing cards, and I love all that stuff, because when I pick a card, it's not really the picking the card. It's the fact that I'm sitting down and giving myself some attention as well, but I'm having a bit of a focus. It helps my mind sort of focus on something. I'm not just sitting and dropping into nothingness or everythingness. I'm actually dropping into like, okay, now let's read the little booklet. What does it say? And it's usually absolutely what I need. So I'd say that's one of them. But the real one for me is calling a friend or meeting up with a friend and just being truthful and having a laugh and a cry and whatever I need to do and getting it out. Just naming it, like naming what it is, like getting it to the surface, because sometimes these things can kind of bubble away and take you away from yourself and get you off center and out of whack. But if you just name it and you just sit down with someone who you can trust, that's really important. It needs to be someone who has the ability to be your sky while you're being the rainstorm, right? You need somebody who can hold you. But then within that holding, you're allowed to say like, okay, I just have to get this out. I've just been feeling so crap here and I've just been doing this and I really shouted at everyone and I'm sure they all hate me and because that always brings me home to myself, always. So yeah, that's my other one. Yeah.
So next question is the worth it meal. So what meal do you have? Because I'm just a foodie. So what meal do you have that makes it worth it? I'm gonna give you a little background history. So when I had my near-death experience, which was the start of my awakening journey, one of the reasons, and so at the end of your life, of this physical experience, you kind of have a kind of your life flashes before your eyes, and like
you kind of think of all the food you really enjoyed.
Right. And one of the reasons why I kind of like I didn't want to go at that time was like,
yeah.
I thought of like, I want my mother's spaghetti like a few more times, right?
Okay.
I want to have that.
I get it. Yeah.
So what's like the worth it meal for you?
The worth it meal for me. Oh, well, it's so interesting because it's kind of changed for me recently. I've just changed what feels really good for my body. But yeah, funnily enough, I think when I think back to like my mum's spaghetti bolognese, that kind of like the comforting sweetness of that, I would have to put that right up there. But then you see, the more kind of evolved, healthy me would have to put this I'm going to send you the recipe. It's this chickpea bruschetta thing that Robert makes. And it's from this super posh Italian guy called Babbo. I think there's a restaurant called Babbo's or something that I've never been to. But Robert goes to these restaurants and then he comes home and he buys the book and he makes the stuff for me because I didn't get to go. He's really sweet. He's a really good cook. And there's this one that he makes and it's this like chickpea with like tapenade, like the black olives, the crushed black olives. Ugh, I'm going to send you the recipe and you're going to literally have another reason to live longer.
Please do, because you mentioned some of my favorite things, which are chickpeas and tapenade. So I'm all on that. Oh
my gosh! Okay, you have to have this recipe. Maybe it's the one that's coming to me. It's because the one that you need in your life.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so last two questions are because I'm a teacher of soul, and it's one of my favorite words. What does soul mean to you? What's your definition?
My definition of soul is the sky, just as I described it before. The sky, the part of me that knows exactly my true identity, and that isn't taken out for a minute by me comparing myself to people in dresses or Brene Brown or any of that, any of my preferences, any of the things I don't like, any of the arguments I get into, any of the self-attack I fall prey to. It's like the part of me that is present and steady and strong. And if I want to get in touch with it, I don't need to do very much actually, because it's like with the sky, you just need to stop and look up. That's all you need to do to make contact with the sky. And in that sense, it's similar too, because it's just this ever-present existing essence. It's like my essence. It's the bit of me that I don't need to try with. that's when I know it's my soul speaking, because it feels so effortless. Yeah.
So next to last question. What do you think humanity most needs to remember right now?
Right now? That's a very good question. I thought these were supposed to be small questions.
Well, they're smaller, I think, than the ones
That's like 3 hours. My God. Okay, I'll find the small answer in myself for that one. Humanity needs to know right now. I think it's just remembering who we really are, and which means our enoughness. The name of your show, like the being enough thing, and the self-love thing. Because what I traced in my exploration of myself and people around me was, I kept coming back to the self-love piece, to this enoughness piece, and I was like, this can't just be about that. This must be something much wider, because I know I'm here for something quite enormous. And then it suddenly hit me really strongly one day that it's that if any of the people at the moment in this world who are carrying out the violent acts, right, who are destroying people and places and life, whether that's people who are ruining the ocean, or people who are carrying out hideous acts of violence in Syria right now, whatever it is, right? It's like if those people had even a centimeter of relationship with themselves, and relationship to their true loving nature and to who they really are, they would be the opposite of interested in what they're doing, but the other thing is that I own that in myself. I own the part of me that blows things up in my life, and that goes outside, that goes into food. That's a whole other topic of my relationship with food. I go into food when really what I need is deeper connection with my God self. But I get distracted and I go into like, what can I eat? And I have to really manage that, and I have to really come home to myself. And I think if people were going to do one thing for me, if I could like stand up for a minute and be like a school teacher and say, this is what you need to do, I think it would be that, like even a centimeter towards any kind of homecoming, like home with a capital H, like homecoming. Me, who am I? What is my place here? And then as I say that, it feels so huge and impossible. But then the true part of me comes in and says, no, it's not impossible. We're all doing that by chopping the carrots gently, by being present to each other right now, by me appreciating you with everything I have right now, for being who you are, and for asking these sweet questions, and for like setting up this whole cyber thing so that we can do this, and and having compassion for myself, that I might go away from this interview and think, oh my God, I have this weird English accent and I sound really odd when I listen to my voice, or whatever I'm going to do to myself, right? In my crazy self. Like if I can just, love myself even then, if I can love the rain and love the clouds and love all of it, it's like, that's my contribution. And just like you were saying earlier, it doesn't matter how many people you speak to. It doesn't matter if only like 2 people watch this thing. It doesn't matter if it's just you and I having a conversation that's not even recorded. It's happening in consciousness. It's happening in the oneness. And that's our contribution. And that's what we have to remind ourselves and each other of, so that we feel empowered in the face of a world that does look like it needs an awful lot right now, So yeah, that's as short as I could keep it. I tried to keep it short. It's quite long.
It was beautiful, though. I mean, everything you said, I think I'm not going to regurgitate it just in time to time, but it was people who are going to hear that are going to get so much from that. It's fully what I believe too. So I won't add to that. It's fully what I would say. So I had a question come in for you, so I'm going to add to the original question. So I had one more, but it branches off into 3 more. So we'll keep them to 1 sentence answers. The other one, and this is the last one that was coming from me, is, so we just said, what does humanity most need to remember? What would you say Hollie needs most to remember right now?
I need to remember to trust the voice of love even more deeply, and to bring that trust and that deepening relationship into every area of my life.
Awesome.
There we go. News to me.
That was one sentence. You got that. Yeah. That was awesome. All right. So last two. The last two are coming from people who are on the call. So one of them is what makes you happy?
What makes me happy? What makes me happy is there's lots of things, of course, but the thing that comes to me the most strongly is being part of a community, like a real community with like 4 a.m. friends and people you can be real with, and people who really truly help each other and serve each other, people who are in service to something greater than themselves. It kind of makes me sad that there isn't a church that I can sign up to, because I love it that much, but I haven't found a church that I love enough. So my worshipping happens through friends, and my watching my children with their friends, and my son has just discovered friendship, and it's like the most precious thing. He's 5 and he has discovered the joy of friendship. There's this little boy at school called Henry, and someone was talking to him the other day, and he said, I am listening to you, but while I'm listening to you, I am thinking about Henry. I mean, it was so sweet, because for me, my friends and my connections and my community is so precious, and watching my children discover the joy of that is so satisfying. Because I want them to have that really lovely feeling of like that level of love with their wider community apart from their family. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay, so last question. And I'm asking this because I think just on my own journey, it is as deeply as important to understand what makes you happy as to understand what doesn't make you happy. So my question is, what is the thing that really does not make you happy?
The thing that does not make me happy is following that other radio station, the radio station that tells me all the things that I can so easily buy into. And the more I listen to that, the unhappier I get. And the further away I feel from myself and from other people. And what happens as well for me when I do that is there's a very convincing story there. And what I'm learning is that it will always be there. There is always a convincing story to keep me small, to keep me unhappy, to keep me trapped in my patterns, to make me believe that I am limited rather than limitless, and that I'm not enough, and that I am going to mess everything up. And that's always there waiting for me. And so what makes me unhappy is simply, listening to that and buying into it. Every now and again I visit that store and I'm like, oh yeah, the same things are on the shelf. Yeah, And I find myself standing in there looking like, when you look in the fridge, like staring like, oh, what can I eat? Yeah. I do that with my kind of super ego nonsense. I look at it but I do feel like I'm learning to choose. But if I stare at it and I start taking stuff off the shelf, it makes me really, really unhappy. Yeah.
So I am just filled to overfull with this conversation. I just want to deeply thank you. I again, if like you said, if it's only just me and you, then definitely some light has been spread, some love has been anchored, some wisdom has been gained. And that was purely enough for me. And as I know, many other people are going to see this, but even if it's just this, this was enough. I want to deeply thank you. I also want to give you a chance for all people who may be listening live and also listening in the replay, to follow, like, where can they hear, where can they connect more with you? Like, what's your blog? What's your Facebook site?
Well, I've kind of whittled it down to my Facebook page because I can't handle more technology than that, it seems. I think if you look up facebook.com/Hollie Holden Love, is that right? Hollie with an IE, Hollie Holden Love.
I'll put a link here.
It comes up, right? If you go into Facebook and you search, and I share most days, I share whatever's going on for me, and I invite people to comment, and I read pretty much everything when I can. So that's the way to be in touch, really. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Holly. There's so much more I can talk to you about, so we'll have to have another interview at some point.
Yeah,
There's so many things.
We're gonna have to have a part 2, like a major part 2, or maybe we could come up with our
Absolutely.
favorite topics and like decide. It'd be cool.
Yeah, let's definitely do that.
And Jerome, I want to, before we go, thank you, not just for inviting me, but for being able to be in this space with me of allowing whatever wanted to arise between us to arise. And I know you had your questions, but they were also guided by just your morning meditation. And it's the only way I really know how to be. And I'm so grateful when people want to be in that space with me. And who cares if people didn't get it, or it didn't come across in a kind of professional way, or it just doesn't, I love that you don't care and I don't care either. And it just feels like the important thing was that we expressed ourselves as best we could, and we tuned into love as best we could when we were speaking. And I'm really grateful to you and for all of your work and your beautiful writing as well. And anyone who's watching me, who's come from my page, you have to go and find Jerome, which I think you can do through this whole weird cyber thing and the links that are probably wherever they are.
Yeah. I'll put a link here too.
Jerome. Yeah, put a link to yourself. It's important.
Yeah, I just put one to Hollie's page.
Don't crash the whole thing like you did at the beginning.
Yeah, I won't crash it. I just put it in the comment section here.
Yeah.
Which I think you said facebook.com, Hollie Holden Love, and mine is facebook.com/Coach Jerome Braggs.
Google me, darling. Google me.
Yes.
I once was in the supermarket and I was making a recipe and I needed the ingredients for a recipe that I'd put up on my blog. So I Googled myself. I put Hollie Holden chocolate mousse and I was like, oh my God, I found my own recipe. I was so impressed with myself. I was like, yeah, Google me, you'll find me. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for everyone who attended. Yeah. Thank you for so much love for just being the container of this space. And all of you, I invite you to just watch out for further kind of conversations like this on being enough. I think this is a great start to this project. And I'm just going to go home. I'm just going to, after I end this, I'm going to sit for a second and just breathe all of this in because I'm definitely expanded. So thank you so much, Holly. I will be sending you the replay to this probably tomorrow, the link for that. Cool. And also just some messages of love later on. But I'm going to disconnect and hold all of us in light and absorb. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Love.
Bye.